Hello and welcome to today's Age Partnership webinar, where I'm delighted to say I've been joined by a true sporting legend, Mr. Tony Jacklin. Tony, welcome to Age Partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to spend some time with us today,
My
talking
pleasure.
about some of your golfing experiences.
My pleasure.
Tony, going back to the very beginning, can you just tell me why were you first interested in golf?
Well, it was through my father. When I was about 9 years old, we were living in Scunthorpe. He was a steel worker, and the neighbour had an experience at the local golf club, and he thought
Right.
my father might enjoy the game. And he wasn't really very sporty. And anyway, they went off to the golf course. I remember vividly that day him saying to my mother, "I'll be back in an hour." And 4 hours later, dinner was in the oven, and he was smitten. And I used to go out and pull his trolley, and then inevitably have a go when we got out of the away from the clubhouse. And I was equally smitten, and that started it all. I had plenty of time on my hands. I was young. I was self-taught. That was it. And all the summers, and by the time I got to 13 or so, I started to become quite proficient.
You were the first British player to win on the US PGA Tour in 1968, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that really helped your game?
Well, I wanted to be as good as I could be. My mission was to be the best player in the world, and I knew I needed to be where the best players were and compete with them week in, week out. So during the 60s, I was climbing the ladder. Everything you win at golf helps your confidence, and certainly that Jacksonville Open in '68 made me realise that things were certainly moving in the right direction. It just took a little more than a year after that for me to win the British Open, which was, majors really was what it was all about, and they define your career at the end of the day.
Yeah. And playing in America, is it very different from playing in European conditions?
When my experiences over here during the 60s on the what was the British tour, British and Irish tour, the great golf courses that we played in those days were links golf courses, and essentially the game is played more on the ground. You've got to keep the ball low, and you're battling the elements all the time. All the great courses are on the coastline and exposed. Whereas in America, the courses are much more manicured, the weather's a bit kinder, and the ball's played more in the air. So, I sort of, it didn't faze me. I learned that, I learned more about the swing when I first went to America than I knew playing in Great Britain. Right. The Americans knew a lot more about swing technique. I learned to swing from the ground up. I learned how important the lower body, the legs are in the golf swing. So I embraced it and enjoyed it, had a good time doing it. Yeah.
And was that something, when you talk about the swing changes there, was that something that you picked up naturally, or was it something where you involved a coach? Or?
Yeah, no, I was playing with the best players in the world, and so I asked them. Tom Weiskopf and Bert Yancey were two very close friends. The biggest problem for me was when I got under pressure, and I was quite good, so I got in the frame often, but everything quickened. Adrenaline rush comes, and you get extra strength, and I got very fast. My swing got fast, and I knew I would never be a great player until I learned to control the speed of my swing. In moments of when you needed a par to win the hole, you needed to know that you could swing smoothly, and that was the sort of last piece of the puzzle, really, that I learnt in 67, 68.
In 1969, obviously, when you won the Open Championship, how did you feel going into that final round?
Nervous, in a word. But it was great. I was playing full time on the American circuit, and the British galleries were behind me, and that was a plus. I thought at that time I was ready ready to take the world on,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense. And I got great support from the British crowds there, and managed to hold off the opposition and get it done. But that final day, and you're not teeing off till sort of mid-afternoon,
Sure.
occupying your mind
Yeah.
during that time is difficult. But and that never changes. That's
Yeah.
the same for every generation.
How did you sort of spend your morning?
I went to some museum or some stately house to just browse and try anything, just to,
Right.
to certainly didn't go to the golf course very early anyway.
Yeah.
It was and occupying your mind during those times it's very difficult. It's a waste of energy trying to go through the game before you play
Sure.
it. You know.
Yeah. And obviously later in that year, in 1969, with the Ryder Cup at Royal Birkdale, where the match was tied at the end, you had a very famous game with obviously Jack Nicklaus, where your particular match ended in fairly famous circumstances. Could you just talk us through how that match finished?
Yeah, well, it was a watershed year for Great Britain and Ireland, 69. It was a very close match. And we ended up on the, I won't bore you with all the details, but we ended up on the 18th tee final game, all square, and the matches were all square. So the result depended on our 18th hole. And all your teammates were around the green and so on. You know, it's we both hit good tee shots, and I raced off ahead of Jack. And he hollered after me, actually, and he said, "Tony." He caught me up and he put his arm on my shoulder. He said, "Are you nervous?" I said, "Jack, I'm petrified." He said, "I just thought I'd ask, because if it's any consolation, I feel just the same way as you do." Yeah. And it was really an unenviable situation to be in. Absolutely. You know. I mean, you talk about pressure. Yeah. And we hit our second shots beyond that onto the green. We were good pals, you know. And we hit our seconds onto the green, and he was a bit closer than I, and I putted up to 2 feet, about like this, and he had a putt to win the Ryder Cup outright for America, which he ran way by. I mean, 5.5 feet, and like the great player he is, he went round and holed that return putt. And when he picked his ball out of the hole, at the same time he picked my coin up. And said, "I don't think you would have missed that, but I would never give you the opportunity in these circumstances." Wow. And he knew I'd won the Open, of course, a couple of months before. He saw the big picture. He didn't want anything to happen to sort of spoil that. And of course I was shocked, relieved, call it what you like. I think I might have made it. I was ready to make it mentally, but I was mighty relieved that I didn't have to. Yeah, I bet, absolutely. And you then went on to win the US Open, obviously in 1970, by a record margin of eight strokes at the time. 7 it was, yeah.
Or was it 7? Right.
And I increased my lead. That was actually the best week of golf I ever experienced. You know, I was on the top of my game, got off to a good start, led by 2. It blew a gale the first day, which made me feel very much at home. All that links experience I'd had during the 60s stood me in good stead there, and I got my nose ahead initially, and then I had I putted well that week. I never considered myself a great putter, but I got a tip that week that really did help me out. Really? And anyway, I increased my lead every day, and I won by 7. So I had them both on my mantelpiece at the same time for a short while, and I was pretty much on top of the world then. Do
you think that performance in the US Open really surprised the Americans at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they were shocked. I mean, Dave Hill, who I played with in the 3rd round, he was whinging about the golf course being a cow pasture or words to that effect, and that was creating a lot of headlines across America. Yeah. And I rather think they would have rather, you know, ignored the fact that an Englishman came over there and won their Open. So probably I didn't get the credit I deserved at the time over there, but nevertheless, you know, now of course there's so many international players going over there. At that time there were just a handful of us, Gary Player, Bob Charles, myself, and Bruce Devlin, and a few Australians. And in some respects, some of the players resented the fact that they saw us being there taking their money, not the great players, never the Nicholases. If you could play, the top players would say, you know, come, you know, and but there was a few mean-spirited pros back then. It was a long while ago, and they came up the hard way, a lot of them as well. So there was, you know, it took a while to get acceptance, I suppose. Yeah.
And moving on to sort of Ryder Cup and I guess captaincy, were you pleased when you were first offered the European captaincy of the Ryder Cup team?
I was shocked when I was asked, because I was, you know, at war, I suppose, with the establishment. I didn't, you know, lots of things had happened that I didn't particularly agree with. And you know, I'd done with the Ryder Cup. I didn't get picked in 81, and circumstances were such that I thought there were people there that really weren't very knowledgeable about what they were doing. But it was an opportunity. I didn't answer the question straight away when I was asked. I took overnight to think about it. And I felt I knew what was wrong, in part, and I was able to go back the next day and say that I would only do it on my own terms. And I kept making demands. The demands really were only to put us at a level with what the Americans were experiencing. We were travelling at the back of the bus on British Airways. They were all flying Concorde. You know, they had cashmere. We wore anything anybody would give us. We couldn't take our caddies, and on and on and on. And anyway, they kept saying yes, okay. I don't really believe they knew how they were going to provide all this stuff I was demanding, but to their credit, they did. And you know, from that moment forward, 83, my first time in America, we came within a whisker of getting it done. But it was clear that these, the changes we made were working. The players were responding, you know, to the way that we're being treated. Their self-esteem had been raised, which was the whole point of my demands in the first place. And that very close match in 83 was a stepping stone to being able to win for the first time in 28 years at the Belfry in 85, and then of course we won for the first time on American soil in 87, which was euphoric. I mean, there's only one first, and that was very special. We halved in 89, which meant we retained it, and I said, I'm done. You know, there was a lot of pressure involved in it. I loved doing the pairings and trying to outsmart the opposing captain, you know, by tucking them in at certain places in the draw. But you know, 4 times was enough. I'd achieved, you know, home and away. I'd done it all, and I made room for others after that. It would have been self-indulgent, really, to carry on, and I'd nothing else to prove, really.
Who was the most daunting sort of captain on the American side when you were going into battle? Did you think? Well,
I mean, Jack. You know, there's nobody. You know, Jack's the greatest player that ever lived, and he doesn't leave any stone unturned when he's operating. And you know, he captained twice against me. The first time in Palm Beach Gardens, he managed to come out victorious, and then of course we won at Millfield Village at his home course. And I said it after. I think you know, he was the only one whose name was big enough for it not to hurt. You know, ongoing. You know, I think. But he was he was a pretty astute captain, and you know, Trevino captain in '85. He was well, he hasn't stopped talking for the last 75 years, but you know, he was doing a lot of that during that Belfry week, and that was quite satisfying to to get it done there against him. And then Raymond Floyd was the last captain, and Raymond was tough too. You know, Raymond's a very astute guy and a great player, and serious about what he attempts to do. So, but it was all fun and wonderful memories from you know, those confrontations. It was great.
What would you describe as your greatest sort of Ryder Cup memory, if you look back over the years?
Well, you know, again, it's a bit like your career. I mean, up to, I suppose, the win 28 years was important, but then the first win on American soil was hard to top. You know, it doesn't get any better than that. There's only one first, as I say. So, but you know, to choose, it's like choosing a favourite child. You know, I don't go there really. It was all fun, and you know, people try and match Ryder Cups with my major wins. Well, I couldn't have captained Ryder Cups when I was 25 years old. I didn't have the knowledge to do that. So, you know, life unfolds, and if you keep your head down, good things happen sometimes. And I've been very fortunate that they happened in nice order. And I've had a fun time the last 52 years playing golf for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for taking some time to have a quick chat about some of your golfing experiences, Tony. I've really appreciated that.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.